Thank you. That's really, whenever somebody introduces me, even though I teach introduction, I'm always amazed because I have to sit there and say, who are they talking about? Who is that person? It seems like, everyone always says it seems like just yesterday that they began, but as I pull up my notes, which I probably won't need, but I always feel like I should have them, it seems just like yesterday I started with one documentary and it is now 16 documentaries in the last 19 years. During that time, I have had, I would say, more than my share of interesting experiences. I have had a shoot without electricity. I've had weird-looking objects coming forward to me on the ground while I was doing an interview. I've been surrounded by hundreds of, if not thousands of people as we try to make our way through to another village. And at the same time, there was some political, not upheaval, but some politicking going on. And so we had 1,000 people surrounding our car. I've been in a courtroom where I actually thought and did begin crying while I was videotaping a woman who was a survivor of intimate partner violence. I've had a lot of experiences, including I've been called many names. And some of the worst names I've been called were not from the people that were involved with the documentary, but were from lawyers from ABC. And I tell you this story because it's an interesting part of what it means to be involved with documentary filmmaking, and in particular, social justice documentary filmmaking. We had worked on a documentary called I Believe You. There's always a subtitle to my documentaries, and there's a reason for that subtitle is because when they're listed in TV Guide, the station affiliate wants to know what the program's about. So I can come up with something cute and clever, like, "What's up, Doc?" But if I don't have something else in the title, the station, the ABC station, for example, doesn't know what it's about, and so they're reticent or can be reticent to program it. So I Believe You was subtitled Faith's Response to Intimate Partner Violence. And what we did is we looked at, across the board, different faiths and how they were dealing with survivors of intimate partner violence. I met amazing women while I was doing this, amazing women and amazing stories. And the more I worked on this project, the more I felt that their stories needed to be told. So when I put together the documentary, a lot of the documentary, as you'll see a piece, is in silhouette. There were only 3 women who it was safe to actually tape, and you could see their face. Everyone else, even though they were out of the situation, was fearful to speak and be seen. And in some cases, we actually changed the voice as well. So I did all of this work on this wonderful documentary, and then I had to submit it to ABC, both standards and practices, as well as legal. And I've been through this before. I'm used to it. They always do things like remark that maybe there is a shot and they think they can see maybe a woman's nipple, maybe, and so I have to get rid of that nipple. So I'm used to this, but this time I wasn't used to what they told me. They said, well, the way you've constructed this documentary, you've constructed it with all these women, but you've used stock photos of abuse, so we want to have at the beginning of your film that something to do with the fact that these are fictionalized accounts or that the images are not real something to the fact of dramatization. And I said, no, you can't do that. The stories that are being told by the women. We obviously weren't in the house while they were being abused, so we don't have that footage. So we've used footage which we've treated in a manner so you can see it's different, it's not in color. And we don't want to take away from these stories by saying that there's a fictional element, because the audio is absolutely the story. So they said, we'll get back to you. So the next day I sat in my office and they called back and they said, you know, we thought about it, you have to do that. It's not going on the air. You have to put some writing which we will design for you, and it will read that these stories are really fiction. And I said, no, I can't do that, you can't do that. At which point the attorney began to curse at me. An attorney for ABC began to curse at me. You effing will. There's no effing way you're not. And this is relentless. I mean, this is cascades of abuse. If you had taken a video of me, I was like, I had never been spoken to like that in my life, and certainly not by an attorney in a business situation. And I said to myself, just hang up. I don't need to air this. I don't need to air it on ABC. I don't need to be abused. That's what it was. It was abuse. It was absolute verbal abuse. But then a part of me said, what about all those women who told me their story in the hope of helping some other woman? And I thought about it as I was being abused. And I thought about how interesting this was happening, because during the documentary, there was a part of me who would look at these women who were telling me how they were brutalized, and a part of me was saying, why did you stay? I knew logically, I had done all the research why they stayed. There's all sorts of articles, 50 reasons why women stay, and these are good reasons. But there was still a part of my brain that was saying, he broke your jaw and he stepped on your face and you stayed. So there was a part of me that still had that. And then suddenly, as is the way with these things, I found myself in the same situation. I was staying on the phone, being abused, because I had a higher goal, which is to get this story out. And those women, more often than not, stayed because they needed to take care of their children, that their children needed medicine that they couldn't get any other way unless they were with this person, or they needed food, or they didn't have money, and they wanted to make sure their children were okay. And so they stayed with that broken jaw. And so I stayed on the phone. I got off the phone. I was not happy with myself, I'm going to tell you right now. I couldn't believe that I had stayed on the phone with someone who was so abusive. I couldn't believe it. And I second-guessed myself. I said, what were you thinking of that you could allow somebody to do this? But that's what I felt I had to do to get this program on the air. And so the program went on the air with that line that ABC demanded was at the head of that film. And I cringed when I saw it, but it went on the air. And the way a lot of my documentaries air is they will air over a 60-day window on ABC stations throughout the country. So every station gets an opportunity to decide when they're going to put it on. At the end of the program, we always put, if you'd like a copy of this program, you can call this number. ABC doesn't allow websites. so you can only have a phone number. But we also had information to call different places for get information about domestic violence. But there was our phone number to call for if you wanted a copy. And in other times, people have called for copies, you know, not a lot, but occasionally. The first Sunday it aired, there was a list of stations that I had. ABC always sends all the stations with when they're airing it. And the phone rang. Sunday, phone rang. Picked up the phone, and a woman was on the other line. She said, I just finished watching the documentary. You're with the documentary. I just finished watching it. She said, can you help me? I said, sure. Excuse me. Where are you calling from? She said, Idaho. I said, Idaho? She said, do you know of a place for me to go? I have to tell you, I don't know anything about Idaho. I don't. But I said to her, sure. Do you have a safe number that I can call you back at? And she said, yes. I said, are you sure? I want to make sure you're going to be safe. She said, yes, you can call this number. I was not prepared for this. I was prepared for people to call and ask for a video. I was not prepared to be looking for places for shelter in Idaho. And I actually asked her, do you have access to the internet? No. So I said, okay, I will call you back. And I sat there on that Sunday, and I went and gathered all the material I could to give to her, and I called her back, and she said, God bless you, and hung up. And I said, and that's why I took the views. And that's why I do what I do, which is make documentaries about social justice issues. So I guess the first question people usually ask sometimes is, actually, what is a documentary? What is a documentary? How many people here have seen documentaries? That's great, that's a lot. How many people like documentaries? Sometimes we see them, we don't necessarily like them. Okay, so my question is, why do you see them? Why do you like them? What are they? Anyone want to take a stab? Yeah.
Reality.
It's reality, which is different from the kind of narrative, which is fiction. Okay, so what we think about documentaries is that they're a slice of reality. A lot of people who are into this kind of stuff sit around and talk about different types of documentaries, and usually they talk about in terms of the form, that they can be expository or they can be poetic. I'm really not into that stuff. I'm into content more than form. I've always been a content person more than form. So when we think of documentaries, we can think of documentaries that are about music. I'm sure many of you have seen some great music, rock concert documentaries. We can think about the documentaries about animals. I'm sure everyone has wandered through the channels and found some documentary about animals having sex, because there's invariably some animals having sex documentary on someplace. There's great travel documentaries. And that looks like such a great job. Oh my goodness, going away someplace, they pay you, and you get to do this documentary. It is terrible. It's a terrible job because you're there to work. So you're not out there on the beach in the sand. You're out there on the beach in the sand with a full set of clothes, taking some images while everyone around you is having a great time. I did one of those. I was never so tired. I think I lost the arch in my foot. I was standing for so long. Everyone said when I came back, I think it was, I'm trying to remember, it was maybe in Jamaica, and it was winter, and everyone said to me, you are so lucky. How was it? I said, I couldn't tell you. I could have been in Patchogue, Long Island, for all I saw of anything other than, you know, those surrounding areas. So there are many things we could do documentaries on. Social justice issues are clearly what matters to me. And I think some of you probably would think, if you thought about it, would say that some of the most compelling for you have been about social justice issues. So when I started doing this, we started doing documentaries, and I had a little bit about how I got there is that I had been, I started at a small company called Bravo. You may have heard of that. So when I started at Bravo, Bravo was literally a channel about the performing arts. It wasn't the channel of housewives from every town you've ever thought of. It was the channel for the performing arts, and actually it aired with, of all things, the Playboy channel. So on the weekends was Bravo, or it may have been reversed, I actually can't remember, but the other part, the weekdays, would be Playboy. And there were a lot of jokes about how ludicrous that seemed to be a combination. But I started producing pieces on the performing arts. So things about ballet in Houston and about the opera someplace else. And then I morphed into going to a company that was a joint venture between CBS and 20th Century Fox. And that was called, not surprisingly, CBS Fox. And I moved into edutainment. I was doing pieces on how to do things, how to become the love of his life, how to read a woman like a book, get rich quick by beating the odds, the guide to videography, the guide to dog care. Most of these were not my idea. They were other people's ideas. Higher up, presidents said, I think it would be a good idea to do something about dogs. Everyone has a dog. Everyone loves dogs. I said, okay, we'll do something on dogs, I guess. And then I moved on after CBS Fox kind of imploded, and moved on, and eventually I started my own company, Diva Communications, and we started producing programs and documentaries that were at that time specifically about faith-based issues. And then what happened was I did a documentary called Faith First, Second Career Clergy. And this documentary was about people who at the ripe old age of any place between 26 and 50 gave up their career, went back to school to become a rabbi or a pastor or something like that. And one of the people I met was a man named Moshe Kotel, may he rest in peace, who had been the head of the music department at Johns Hopkins University. Not too shabby. He had written, like, one of those people who writes an opera when they're like 4, had it presented when he was 7, something like that. He had always been a music person, and he was really an extraordinary human being. And at the age of 50, after being the chair of the department there for quite some years, he decided he was going to give it up, and he was going to go back to school and become a rabbi. When I met him, he was finishing rabbinical school, and we had finished the documentary, and on a December night, I was up, as I usually am, working at 4 in the morning, and I get an email from him, and he writes, Debra, I'm going to Uganda in the beginning of February to help with the formal conversion of a group of Abba Yudaya, and I thought you should come. I should say you and David. My husband's name is David, and we work together. He said, you and David should come. I thought Uganda. Let's be fair. First of all, I wasn't sure where Uganda was. Okay, I knew it was in Africa. Okay, but I wasn't sure. If you asked me on a scale, if I could list all the places I wanted to go, top 100, Uganda would not have been on that list. But I said, sure, that sounds great. That was in December, and in the beginning of February, we went the long distance got to Uganda. Okay, so here we are. So we went and we did this documentary.
Constantly amazed that in every corner of the world there are fellow Jews. It has been said that if there are 12 million Jews, there are 13 million Judaisms, and from the earliest age, I knew that to be true. There were Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Modern Orthodox, Reconstructionist, Renewal, Egalitarian Observant Conservative Jews, Eco-Jews, Satmar, Lubavitch, and so many more. There were Jews like my grandparents, who had lost a total of 18 brothers and sisters, along with their parents, in the camps. There were my parents, who never set a foot in shul, yet my mother sent her 3 girls to Yiddish school. And growing up, I always assumed that all these Judaisms managed to somehow successfully coexist, or at least appear to. And then one day, I heard about a group of Ugandans called the Abiyudaya, and all what I had previously thought about who is a Jew and what makes a Jew was called into question.
So that's the opening to Yearning to Belong, which is an examination of this group of Ugandans called the Abiyudaya, and they live 5 hours from Kampala. And for reasons that seem incomprehensible in a way, their leader, a man named Kingalu, in 1919 was very wealthy and worked with the British, and he had some time on his hand after he set up a lot of churches, and he went ahead and sat down and read the Bible. And after reading the Bible, he decided that the Old Testament was correct, and the New Testament he didn't like, so he ripped out the New Testament, and then he had himself circumcised and circumcised all the people, the men in his tribe, and so they started following and calling themselves Jews, and that went on for 70 or 80 years, and until one day in the late 1990s, or actually it was a little bit early, 1992, one of the men you see there was in Nigeria in a synagogue for the holidays, and this college student named Mike Meyer saw him, and in Nigeria there was only Israelis and European American there. They were all white. There was one African person. So being 19, Mike Meyer kind of went over to him in the seat and said, who are you? What are you doing? What are you doing here? And that person named Gershom proceeded to tell him about the Abiyudaya. Mike went to see him. He couldn't believe it. He came back to the United States and tried to get people interested. And it took some time, but in 2002, a group put together rabbis from around the world, 3 or 4 rabbis, to go there to do a formal conversion ceremony. And I was part of that group. And the reason that the Abu Udaya wanted the formal conversion ceremony was that not very far in their past, they had to deal with Idi Amin, who did not allow them to practice their religion, and they wanted to feel that if that was supposed to happen again, they could call on the larger community. So we went there. It was transformative. It was transformative because I came back and did the documentary that you saw a piece of, but I came back wanting to do something about the Abu Udaya and water. In fact, I almost called this documentary, "I Just Want to Get Them Water, David." That was the name for a while. You can see why it didn't make it to the end. Water, every night when we would leave, they would give us these large containers, yellow containers, for us to go and get water for them to come back. And they didn't have tops. You would stick a banana in the top, and that's how they got water while we were there. The water that I saw was not something I would want anyone to drink or go into. And there was no electricity, so videotaping there was very, very difficult. We used a cable into the car battery, you know, where you put your lighter. That's what we used when we had to videotape in the evening. So I came back with this desire to use documentaries to let people know of stories that I thought were important, and I thought this was an important story. And this film subsequently was in film festivals and seen around the world and won an Emmy. More important than that, over time, with a lot of other things, I am not in any way saying this was the cause, but with a lot of other things, they eventually they have some electricity and they have some water, and the situation in their life is considerably changed. We came back and we were all revved up, and but one of the things about documentary filmmaking is, if you don't know this, I'm going to be the person to break it to you. There is no money. This is not a career choice that you should contemplate if you are looking to make money. It isn't. It's really not. We often see the things around Michael Moore's documentary or this one's documentary. Those are the exception, and really the exception. This year alone, at something called MIPDoc, which is like the version of Cannes Film Festival, but it's for documentaries, there were 1,400 documentaries at this event. 1,400. The number of documentaries that are produced every year in the United States is, you can't even find a number, because everyone is producing a documentary. Why is that? Well, you can get a camera for however much you can afford. You can get a small editing system pretty cheaply now, and you can sit in your home until your eyes bug out of your head and put together a documentary. I don't know if anyone's going to see it, but you can do that. It doesn't make money. Very, very hard to make money. In fact, the number of documentaries in the last 25 years has increased exponentially. The revenue from all those documentaries is still the same as it was 25 years ago. So there may be many more documentaries. There's no more money than there was 25 years ago. So I am really serious when I say it is not a career choice for someone who would like to have some money. But then why are all these people, why am I doing it, and why are all these people doing it? Well, people do it because there are other things that are important to them, like making an impact, like repairing the world, like being able to have a voice when you see something is wrong, like being able to help someone out or a group of people out that you think don't have a voice. That's why people make them. So this is the open of I Believe You, which is, as I said, a piece that I felt really I wanted to do because I thought the incidence of intimate partner violence was increasing. There didn't seem to be much being done in terms of legislation. And I also felt that faith groups had some role in some of the problem and also need to look at what they were doing to help those women. Thank you.
You hear all these stories about domestic violence and you think, oh, that could be me. It's you more times than you realize.
He beat me for his entire lunch hour. I was told that whenever my husband got angry that it was my fault, that it was something that I did to anger him, to upset him.
When we got home, there was this barrage of disapproving filth that came out of his mouth.
I don't know what triggered you. You just never knew what might trigger it.
I remember thinking, as long as he doesn't hit me, it's not abuse.
I was beaten so bad when I was pregnant, my face was disfigured.
My uncle, the minister, said, God didn't create you to be abused. And that really meant a lot to me.
I lost my home. I lost my child. I lost my personal belongings. I lost myself, my inner self.
Somebody hear me, 'cause we can't seem to break free. Release me from all this pain I feel.
I have come to understand that when I cried, God cried. And when I laughed, God laughed. And when I found my way through, it was because God was leading the way.
As I begin this journey.
So that's the opening of I Believe You, and it really seemed to me, of all the documentaries at that point, to really have the most impact. We received calls from, as I said, that first Sunday, and that's really the kind of call, I'm not saying thousands of calls, but we received tens of calls every Sunday from women. It has been seen around the country numerous times. I am speaking this summer at the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Americas. They have a triennial for the women's ministry. It will be shown there, and I will be speaking there. And it is used repeatedly, and it really seems to have had a great impact. And so we're really proud of that. I jumped ahead. Before that, and this goes back to the issue of money. We were approached by a man who said, I love your work. Have you ever thought of doing a documentary on the issue of persons with disabilities and how faith groups should be addressing this issue? And I said, honestly, I hadn't, but I was intrigued. And he said, I'll raise all the money for you. Well, I was really intrigued then. I thought, Absolutely. I would love that. That's a great idea. So we started working together. I would go into the city to his office and we would meet, and he was talking about 3-part series. He's sure he can get it on Oprah and all the stuff. And I met him through someone who is a very good friend and is very, very reputable. So it wasn't like I met him off the street. And I worked and I started meeting a lot of people in the community persons with disabilities, in faith groups who were dealing with people, and everyone was really excited about it. 6 months into the project, he disappeared. The good news is he didn't disappear with any money. The bad news is I was committed to do the program. I had met these people. I felt that I was giving voice to their concerns. And ABC thought that I was delivering a program. I had no money, none. When I say none, I really mean none. Other people say none. Well, I only had $300,000 to do the program. I mean none. So I didn't know what I was going to do, and the market, this was 2008, the market had crashed, nobody had money, foundations weren't giving money, there was no money. Everyone said, no money, no money, no money. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is going to be the most embarrassing thing that I'm going to actually not deliver on a project. It's never happened. So I decided to see if I could gather existing footage. Perhaps people had done things about this issue. Maybe I could find 2 minutes here and edit it together. I was desperate. I was really desperate. And slowly but surely, I did start to find things, and we start to videotape a little bit here and a little bit there. But at the end of August, I still didn't have, I didn't have a program. I didn't have a program. And I was missing an element I wanted. There seemed to be a lot of work we had done with a wonderful woman named Bishop Peggy Johnson, and she has a ministry for the last 30 years. She deals with people who are deaf or who have other challenges in that area. And I felt we didn't have anything in some other faiths. So I'm, once again, 4 o'clock in the morning, online, going, what am I going to do? I don't have a show. And I think I started hallucinating. I do, because I did a search, and in the search, I see the words deaf rabbi, documentary about deaf rabbi. I go, oh, that would be great. Maybe they would give me or let me have 15 minutes or something that I could use. So I try to find a documentary about a deaf rabbi. Well, there's no such thing. I literally feel like I hallucinated. But I figured out there was something on YouTube that was a video of a rabbi who had just been ordained, who was the first, this word for it, really seriously from birth, deaf rabbi. So I pull up YouTube, and sure enough, wonderful YouTube, they have a videotape of his ordination, and it's very funny. And I go, this is great, this is great. And where does he live? He lives in New York. I call up the next day and say, basically, I've seen this, can I have that? I just ask people, give it to me. I don't talk about money, I don't have any money. So I'm not asking to buy it, I just say, can you give it to me? And they said yes, and he agreed to an interview, and we did this whole piece. And then I thought, what about children? We don't have enough children with disabilities, and what are faith groups? So again, I went online, and some rabbi in California is writing about a young man named Brandon Kaplan. And Brandon Kaplan is so severely disabled, the doctors cannot even diagnose what caused it and the extent of it. He doesn't talk, he doesn't really see, he has very thick glasses, very disabled, but he's going to be bar mitzvahed. I contact the rabbi the next morning, and they say, oh, we videotaped that, we have 2 hours of footage. We'll FedEx it to you tonight. I go, oh, this is amazing. And so we wound up putting together a documentary. It's called A Place for All. And we'll see if I can get it here because I haven't been good before. Let's try. Oh. And this is, I put in, this is, I'm just going to stop it, but this is just a piece.
That'll be plenty, so make it bigger.
Oh, that's, okay, great. Thank you.
Many things are taken for granted. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the sun that warms us, the opportunity to read a good book, the study of what interests us, and the ability to go where we want, when we want, and connect with our God. But for those who cannot read the prayer book, cannot hear the sermon, cannot walk down an aisle, worship with a welcome community is a longed-for treasure, and it takes strength and courage to pursue that bond, find that home.
Guide us with your strength, keep us in your shelter, fill us with the gift of shalom.
It is currently estimated that 1 out of 5 Americans have some form of disability. And many of those people aren't involved in their faith communities as much as they would.
So that was the open. There was another piece, but I know I have some time constraints. And this program, which was done now a number of years ago, is once again an example of something that has an impact. This year, it was chosen last year, 2013, to be the program, the video focus of the United Methodist Church for 2014. And so in United Methodist churches throughout the country this summer, people will be looking at this program and engaging in discussions about what they can do to really open their doors and look at the entire population. So we moved on. We did a program called A Piece of Bread, P-E-A-C-E. I thought it was clever. I regret that title because nobody seems to realize that I meant a piece of bread. And that was really interesting because it was about hunger in America. And nobody wants to really talk about hunger in America because everyone feels, well, we may be a little hungry, but we're not hungry like people in other places. Well, that's not true. And what is a real problem here in the United States is that everyone is really ashamed to say that they don't have food. And so the shame, I can tell you, the shame of people who don't have food was almost as equal to the shame of people who had been victims of intimate partner violence. And one of the interesting things that happened there is we interviewed Senator McGovern in Massachusetts, who is a big proponent of SNAP and all sorts of wonderful programs to provide food for children, et cetera, et cetera. And I knew that there was a political issue. He's a Democrat, and we have to be fair. But I interviewed him in August, and he wasn't going to be up for election till the following November. So I thought, okay, you know, this is going to be okay. When we submitted the show to Standards in Practice and Legal, they called and they said, you got to get rid of the senator. You got to get rid of him. I said, why? All he said was hunger is bad. There's nothing political about this. I mean, we really had edited him down to the equivalent of hunger is bad. No, you can. He's running for office. He's running for office. He hasn't declared that he was running, and no one has declared they're running against him. You got to remove it. I said, I was a little older than the last time they beat me up. I said, talk to my lawyer. It stayed in. So that program really looked at young people and what they were doing, new ways they were coming to the situation about hunger in America. And then I moved on. I thought, what was the number one issue in terms of real problems that people are always talking about? And I thought, and I knew what the answer was, and it was really about health care. Because there's not a day that goes by that somebody isn't talking about health care. And this was before, obviously, before the rollout in Obamacare and stuff like that. I wanted to do something about what's going on in this country and not having insurance and not having money, and what is this country going to be doing about it. So we did a program called Divine Prescription, and this was the one that was just mentioned that just won an Emmy a week and a half ago, and that was really pretty exciting. And it's really the stories of 8 different people and how they're bringing health care, or they're bringing their involvement with their community on the issue of health care. So there's one person, Sister Judith Ann, who I've become a big fan of Sister Judith Ann. Sister Judith Ann is about yay high. She maybe weighs about, I don't know, I guess 90 pounds. And she runs a multi-billion dollar healthcare organization in Indianapolis, Illinois, Indianapolis area. And then there was a piece about a guy who was involved with swabbing the inside of his mouth. You know, you can swab the inside of your mouth, and that DNA is loaded into a bank, and he was called upon the following year to donate some blood or stem cells, and he saved a life. There was a guy on Long Island who was dying. They made a match, not that easy. They made a match, and they met. That doesn't usually happen. They met. The Mets put on a whole big day at the stadium, and they met, and he got to meet the guy that he literally saved. And the last part of that program was the story of a woman named Reverend Diane Smalley. So one of the things that is interesting about documentary filmmaking, or at least the way we've been doing it, is we stay in touch with almost everyone who's been in every one of our documentaries. Reverend Diane Smalley was the voice that you heard when she said, he broke my, she was pregnant, and he did so much damage that he actually broke the bones in her face. So she had been in that documentary, and she, the year after that, she came and stayed with us when she went to speak at the UN, for the UN Conference on Women and stuff like that. And then, lo and behold, I hear from her that she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I was appalled, shocked, all of that. But more than that, I was shocked because she let me know that she had no insurance. I thought, how is that possible? She had been a pastor for 16 years. How is it possible? You know, when someone tells you they have no insurance, you don't really want to push them and say, hey, you have cancer, how is it possible? You back off. But I spoke to her about whether she would agree to be in this documentary and tell her story. And she wanted to. And so we videotaped her in Detroit, and she put off, as people do, going to the doctor, even though she knew something was wrong, but she didn't have money. So she put it off and put it off and put it off until she could not put it off any longer. And she went, and as she's sitting in the emergency room, they look at her, and then the people go out, and she says they didn't have a good, happy look about them. They didn't look so great. And after some time, she started thinking, I don't have money. I'm sitting here, it's an hour. What does an hour in a ER room cost? I don't have money for this. And so she puts on her clothes to leave. They come back in and they say, you can't leave. we have to examine you. We think you have cancer, and it was the size of an orange. They immediately enrolled her. She said, I don't have insurance, I can't be here, which was, in retrospect, she'll tell you, a pretty stupid thing to say. She has cancer, of course she has to be there. But they say, come, we're going to enroll you, and what they have in Michigan is something called the Washtenaw. It's basically a charitable insurance plan that will pay for all of these services, except they don't pay for chemotherapy. But there was another organization called the Sisters of Mercy who stepped in and paid for her chemotherapy. Her church and a number of churches in the area had all sorts of things, and people gave money because, you know, if you're sick, you can cover all the bills, but how are you living? What are you living on? And so they got together and they did this, and she went into remission. So from that film, we moved to today, and the film that we have just produced, and which is actually started airing 2 weeks ago. And I was just saying to your provost that of all the films, I'm not sure why this film that we've just done has had more press than any of our other films. I can't tell you why. That I can just tell you that that's what's happened. This film is called All of the Above, and it is all of the above, colon, I tell you, I always have that colon, single clergy mother. And it is about 4 women, 3 rabbis, 1 woman who is starting to be a cantor, who found themselves at a point in their lives where they did not have a significant other in their life, but did not want to abandon the idea of a family. And they went ahead and they either adopted or had a medical procedure and have created families. If you have a DVR, timing is everything in life. It is on this Sunday in New York at the ungodly hour of 5 in the morning. When you ask ABC about this, they say to me, well, nobody sees anything in real time, everyone records, and truthfully, I can't argue with them because I never see anything in real time, so I can't very well say, well, that's not true, because I think it is certainly true in our case. So this has seemed to be touching a nerve for many people, and we feel that it's great that it opens the discussion. Going forward, what would I say to people who are contemplating this career? As I said, it is a very tough road. You want to spend your time thinking about ideas and doing the shooting and creating the program and really working on the documentary, and you have to spend an enormous amount of time finding the funds to do it. Grant writing, for those of you who are interested in writing, grant writing, a great career. You want to talk about money, you can make a lot of money if you know how to write grants, because everyone needs help in grant writing, and that's what you have to do to get funding. The reasons to do it are clear. You feel that you can make an impact and be creative. And I think now more than ever, there are a lot of possibilities. You all have been involved at some point and seen a Kickstarter campaign, right? So somebody says, you know, $20 and your name will be on the credits. And you go, okay, $20, oh. So people have been successful in raising money through Kickstarter, and perhaps more interesting, the era of distribution only by the movie studios is gone. Distribution now occurs online more and more every day. There are 1,000 ways films can be distributed. It can go on iTunes. You can see your films there. But there are so many others. Vimeo Pro has just launched one. Our films will probably go on Some of them will go in there, something called Distribufy. There are many, many things that have better or worse breakdowns in terms of money, but you can control what you charge, and if you can get the word out, more and more people can see, so you can really make an impact. People always say at the end, what is it that I would say to budding filmmakers? And I think I've said a lot, so I don't think that that's a question. But I think one thing that I want to mention and convey, if you can, do an internship. And the reason is, and do an internship and do it well. And what does doing well mean? It's in one sentence. And it's what I said to a faculty member who was coming for a job, and he was on a substitute line, and he said to me, what is it that I have to do to get the full-time position? And I said to him, make yourself indispensable. And that's the key. If you're an intern and you make yourself indispensable, then it's more likely than not, the next time somebody's doing a film or the next time they want something, they're going to call on you because they remember you were great. You were great there. They loved having you. Made whatever it was, you made life easier. People who become indispensable are hired over and over again. And loyalty in the documentary world, and maybe others, but I'm just talking from this, is really important. I use the same composer for my documentaries for 20 years. I use many of the same people because they know me and they will come through for me and they will do good work. If you get a job as an intern and you can provide that, they're going to call you, they're going to want to put you on, they're going to want to put you on in a paying position because you made life better and easier. And once you get your foot in the door, then you have so many opportunities to sit and be involved in the edit, to sit and be involved in the actual shooting, to sit and be involved in all of this. And even, amazingly or not, you can come up with ideas. And you'd be surprised to see that people will say, that's a great idea. Let's talk about how maybe we could do that together. So, in conclusion, I hope that I've given you kind of a broad view of the pitfalls and benefits and advantages of this kind of documentary filmmaking. Because I did not have the Mac that I asked for, I'm sorry that so many of the clips that I want to show you, but they're all on Vimeo, and you can see them all, and I invite you to look. And I also invite any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you. That was really wonderful, Dr. Gonsher. We do have time for some questions. So questions from our students, from our faculty. Just say your name and your major, or if you're a student, if you're a faculty member, just say your name.
Joseph, I'm a journalism major. You work, well, how do you bridge your work with other social justice thoughts? Because it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you work primarily in the faith-based realm. And social justice typically rails against religion because it causes so much social injustice. So how do you bridge your world with theirs?
Well, I have this weird thing about me. I do a lot of the faith-based work because I can get it seen. And so because I know that I can get it seen to a large audience, a network audience, that is where we've done a lot of our work. We are working on a project that looks at ghettos because in 2016 will be the 500th anniversary of the first ghetto. How many people know where that was? Anyone? First ghetto, anyone? Venice. So it will be the 500th anniversary. So we've been working on a project for quite some years, dealing with grants again, NEH, and so forth and so on. And that is less about the faith perspective, but that would have a different audience and would be for airing on PBS. Yes? Hi.
Just
Would you
say your name and your major.
My name is Crystal Alexander. I'm a journalism major. Would you consider yourself a journalist?
No, I would consider myself a documentary filmmaker.
A documentary filmmaker, okay. Do you think it's a bit unethical for you to do faith-based films only for the sole purpose of it being the reason that it's paid, or more people can see it? I don't know if that makes sense.
Can you repeat the question?
All right, do you feel like it's a bit unethical for you to do a film having like a faith-based backing because it's going to be seen by a larger audience?
Why would it be unethical? These are issues that are important to me. These are issues that I care about. I am very concerned about intimate partner violence, and I'm very concerned about what the faith groups are doing in that arena. I don't think that the documentaries sugarcoat the issue. I'm very clear that in the area of intimate partner violence, we have a whole section about what the distortion of the holy texts and how the holy texts have been distorted and misused by people who want to hold it up as the example of why someone can beat their wife. But I also want, what I think is mentioned and very interesting is I think that we have a very unnuanced perception. So everything in social justice, when it relates to faith, is always bad. And I think that in many respects, there is a lack of a voice. And an example of that would be Girl Rising. And I bring that up because we're doing a documentary on girls' education. But it has the piece that was missing out of Girl Rising, which is looking at what people of faith are doing in that area. I found Girl Rising a wonderful film, but I found it odd that the stories were of women in countries that are very involved in their faith, and there is no mention of faith. So I think we have a balancing act, but I think in terms of unethical, I think that that isn't even a conversation. Yeah.
Well, my name is Glenn Lewis. I'm the director of the journalism program. Let me just come at that same thing, but a slightly different way. I was just called in recently by PBS to be a journalism consultant to deal with sponsored journalism and to make sure that it had a journalistic edge and that the sponsors weren't hijacking the project. Okay, so for your project, where do you draw the line for sponsored pieces on the role of the sponsor, and how much say do they have in putting together the approach to the project?
They have no say. That's part of the contract. If I got funding from the faith group, we don't get funding from faith groups all the time. We sometimes do, but we get funding from outside grants that are not tied into into any specific faith. This last documentary is an interesting exercise because we thought we would get funding from grants, from foundations. We got absolutely no funding, which I talk about a lot, what that says about what's going on in the community. But we got no funding. What we did it anyway because we cared about it, and that's what we do. But there's no doubt we have gotten funding from different faith groups, but part of the gig, so to speak, is that all their role is they can direct me to some interesting people, which I may or may not use, and they get to correct any error if I've made a factual error. For example, if I've said that there were 17 communities and there were 14. That's the extent, and it is written in the contract that way. They don't see a rough cut. They don't see. They're as surprised at the end as everyone else.
Actually, that's pretty fortunate because that's not usually the case. I mean, in a lot of situations lately, there's been big problems with sponsors sort of trying to hijack the message of the documentaries. So it's good that you do that.
Yeah.
He was up before, he's back. Why don't you stand up and say your name and question?
I guess it wasn't as
I just had a question about like far as access goes? Like when you're doing.
Just speak up a little bit so we can hear you.
I just had a question about like access. Like when you're doing a documentary like this, or you're sponsored by someone, is the access already granted to you to go in and film?
Is the access granted to me?
Prior, or do you have to like, or is that like, or is that something you have to go and talk to people about?
I have to go and talk to people. I'll use an example of United Methodist women who was involved in terms of they gave some money for the production of I Believe You. Their extent of this was to give me a list of 12 programs that they said they were involved with. Out of those 12 programs, I called all of them. 10 of them said they had no involvement, and they didn't even have a program running anymore. So that was a great list. The other 2 had a program. One of them I spoke with, and I thought, this is just duller than, there's nothing here. And the other one I met with, I spoke to, flew out, and we both decided whether we want to continue to work together or not. But United Methodist Women, I love them, but they were of absolutely no help. In fact, I would say in a way they were a little bit of a hindrance because I took a couple of days to find out that 10 of their supposed projects were not even operational.
I had sort of like a follow-up. Like, do you have any sort of like when you're doing a film, like, is there any sort of boundaries? I guess.
Boundaries.
Are you talking about like privacy issues?
Like like what things that they won't let you film or.
Well, I am not 60 Minutes. I'm not trying to catch somebody doing something in a manner so I can say, wow, look at this. First of all, in terms of feature films, that's fine, but in terms of getting on, airing on television, there's other considerations. So when I do interviews and when I interview people, I always say to them, most all the time, that I come with enough questions that if they don't like any of the questions they don't want to answer, I'm going right on to the next question. I'm just moving on. Invariably, I don't want to say all the time, but most of the time, people who shied away from a question in the first 10 minutes of an interview, I come back at it 30 minutes in, and 9 times out of 10, they will decide to answer it. But I'm not going to push their answer, and I'm not going to, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I do. So for example, there is a woman in all of the Above, the most recent documentary. So there are 4 women, and one of the women is from Pennsylvania. She has 3 children, which she carried herself, and 2 which she adopted. She never, even though I tried to get her to disclose, and I did it subtly in all sorts of interesting ways, she never, ever mentioned anything about the fact that she is a lesbian. She never mentioned how she conceived these children. She later said something that was very innocuous about the sperm donors had been whatever, but how it came about, no matter how I went at it, she was not disclosing it, and at some point, I know that it's not going to happen, so. Yeah.
So you call yourself a documentarian, not a journalist. I'm the journalism faculty here also. My name is Tom Warney. Thank you for coming. I've enjoyed the talk very much. Can you give us somehow, this question's too big, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The research, the reporting, the interviewing, that's what we're teaching so much of in the journalism program. We're doing a class next semester that has a whole semester of video and audio pieces where they're going to be doing all of that research and reporting and interviewing. How would you describe that process, since you've got a lot of journalism majors here?
Well, I'm going to say the thing that probably students aren't going to like to hear. Don't throw things at me. Research is key, crucial, essential, amazing, important. You can't do it without it. And I mean it with every single ounce of my being. You can't spend enough time on research. I just don't think you can spend enough time. You may not have enough time, But there is no such thing as spending too much time on research. And I can say I am so serious about this. My great story about this is I did a show, a documentary called Everyone Prays at Holy Echmiadzin. Okay? It's about the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church. When I was asked to do this program, I don't even want to say I knew nothing. I knew less than nothing, meaning I knew wrong stuff. So I had to work just to get up to the nothing bar. And I went and I spent about a good 3 months reading everything. And so when I interviewed the bishop in Manhattan, I asked a question that I knew, and he actually didn't know the answer. And I said, that's the way, research, 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 research. You can't have too much.
Sounds like you're a journalist to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Maybe one more question? There's a hand. So I thought there was one more. Was there someone back here who had a hand? Change your mind? All right, then we'll give you the last one.
So, because you're not a journalist, I mean, a lot of people are getting their news or their news outlets, any kind of information they have from documentaries these days. So, where do you draw a line between saying I need to show fair and balanced stuff?
Where do I draw a line?
I mean, do you draw a line, saying that you're not a journalist, but
Well,
this is a new format?
Yeah, I think that every project that I begin, I say I'm not going to sugarcoat this issue. So the issue of faith and persons with disabilities. Well, the faith movement is really slow. Has been really slow. There's just no way of saying it. If you go into Manhattan, you will see churches and you will see synagogues that still have steps. How are people getting up there? There is nothing going on. And I say, I don't care that there are landmark laws. You've got to do something. So we really confronted that issue straight on, and we talk about that in the documentary. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that in some cases, the faith groups are way better than they were 20 years ago. They are. I mean, there are many more programs than there were, and in the area of for the deaf, it's exponentially so. So I'm going, and certainly domestic violence or intimate partner violence, we went pretty hard. I mean, we have Imam Latif, who is the imam down at NYU, and he's pretty darn tough on calling out those people in the Muslim faith who think that there is holy scriptures or texts that actually allow this. So, do I think it's the most balanced? I don't know how you measure it. I think that we do a good job of talking about the problem, saying that there's a problem, there's a major issue, here are what some faith groups are doing to deal with it. Yeah.
You added that most of your work, its dynamic is based on, it's mostly faith-based. So while trying to make your documentaries, what are some of the most challenging difficulties you face?
Well, there's no doubt that as challenging as Uganda was, the documentary on intimate partner violence was hands down the most challenging, because the nature of it is that we're shooting, it's all in silhouette. I mean, it's a good part of it is in silhouette. It's interviews, so you're really talking about how to make something, in this day and age, a visual medium, but we're having interviews, and the interviews you can't even see the person's face. So that was, without a doubt, the most challenging. And also, personally, I thought it was the most painful. I've never, other than that documentary, I've never been in another situation where the cameraman is here. It was a very small room in a courthouse. I am literally on the cameraman's back, and I am crying. Because this woman talking to that lawyer and explaining that she knew the moment that he had no problem beating his son in the store, that he would, all bets were off. And she knew she was in danger. And when that night when he threw a fan at her face and did some other things, I mean, it was, and she had no money. No money. I mean, no money. 3 kids, no money. And she was getting a court order of protection. That was really, that documentary was definitely the most difficult. I don't know if that was exactly what you're going for, but.
We're going to need to wrap up here so folks have time to get some refreshments, get to their 4 o'clock classes, but we always like to give our guests some remembrance of your college. So for Dr. Gonsher, we want to thank you for coming. Sorry, it doesn't include $1 million grant, but we'll work on it.
Okay.
So I really want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
Another round of applause.
Thank you very, very much.